Ahmed Hassan had been Ilhan Omar's community coordinator for 5 years. Until he walked into the FBI, I saw everything. He said from the witness stand. Campaign funds, fake charities, money flowing to armed groups in Somalia. The Congresswoman knew all of it. The hearing room in the Capitol fell silent. Every eye turned to Ilhan Omar, who sat rigid at the defendant's table, her hijab framing a face that had gone ashen. Behind her, a phalanx of lawyers whispered urgently, but their client seemed beyond their reach. Frozen in the headlights of truth, Kash Patel stood slowly, his movement deliberate, calculated. As the lead investigator for the House Oversight Committee, he'd seen corruption before. But this was different. This was a sitting member of Congress funneling money to terrorists. Mr. Hassan, Patel began, his voice carrying the weight of what was to come. Let's start from the beginning. How did you come to work for Representative Omar? Hassan shifted in his seat, clearly nervous but determined. I was hired in 2019. Fresh out of college, idealistic. I thought I was going to help the Somali American community in Minneapolis. I thought I was working for someone who understood our struggles. What changed your mind? The first red flag was about 6 months in. I was asked to help organize a fundraiser for what I was told was a humanitarian organization back in Somalia. Horn of Africa Relief Fund, they called it. Byron Donalds leaned forward. What made you suspicious of this organization? The amount of money we were raising versus what was being reported. We'd collect 100 Zalos at an event, but only 20,000 would show up on the official reports. When I asked about the discrepancy, I was told it was for administrative costs. 80% administrative costs. Patel's voice dripped with skepticism. That's what I thought. So I started digging. The organization's address in Mogadishu. It was a vacant lot. The board of directors. Most of them didn't exist. The ones that did had connections to Al-Shabaab. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Several reporters rushed out to file updates.
That's a lie,
Omar suddenly shouted.
This is Islamophobia.
This is, sit down, the committee chairman ordered. You'll have your chance to respond. Continue, Mr. Hassan. Hassan pulled out a folder. I kept copies of everything. Wire transfers, coded communications, meeting notes. The Congresswoman wasn't just raising money for fake charities. She was running a sophisticated network to fund terrorism while making it look like humanitarian aid. Patel took the folder, examining its contents. His expression grew darker with each page. Mr. Hassan, this document here. Can you explain what it is? Hassan looked at the projected image. That's a wire transfer authorization. A $2.7 million from the Omar Friendship Foundation to something called the Humanitarian Relief Network in Mogadishu. And what was the Humanitarian Relief Network? A front. I traced it through 3 shell companies. The money ended up with the Amniyat. That's Al-Shabaab's intelligence wing. Byron Donalds stood up. Let me make sure I understand this. You're saying a sitting member of the United States Congress knowingly sent $2.7 million to a designated terrorist organization? Not just once, Hassan replied. This was systematic. Over 3 years, I documented at least $8 million in transfers to various fronts, all ending up with Al-Shabaab or affiliated groups. Omar's lead attorney, Robert Steinberg, jumped to his feet. This is hearsay and speculation. It's documentation. Patel cut him off. He pulled out another file. Mr. Hassan, are these the bank records you provided to the FBI? Yes. Every transfer, every authorization. And look at the signature on each one. The signature was unmistakable. Ilhan Omar had personally approved every transfer. There's more, Hassan continued. The Congresswoman didn't just send money. She sent intelligence. The room erupted. This was beyond financial crimes, this was treason. What kind of intelligence? Byron Donalds asked when order was restored. Immigration enforcement schedules, IC raid locations in Minneapolis, names of Somali Americans cooperating with federal authorities. She passed it all through her network. How do you know this? Hassan pulled out his phone. Because I recorded her doing it. The room went silent as he connected his phone to the audio system. A moment later, Ilhan Omar's voice filled the chamber. The raids are scheduled for Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. Riverside, Cedar, and Phillips neighborhoods. Make sure our people know, and tell Mogadishu that the FBI informant is named Abdi Warsame. He lives at. Patel stopped the recording. That's enough. We get the picture. Omar was on her feet again. That's taken out of context. I was warning constituents about a federal law enforcement operation? Patel's voice was ice. and identifying confidential informants to foreign nationals. What context makes that acceptable, Congresswoman? She sat back down, her lawyers frantically whispering. Hassan. Byron Donalds continued, you mentioned coded communications. Can you elaborate? Hassan nodded. The Congresswoman used a system of code words. School supplies meant weapons. Medical aid meant cash transfers. Student scholarships meant payments to fighters' families. How do you know these codes? She told me. Said it was necessary to protect our humanitarian work from government interference. I was naive enough to believe her at first. When did you realize the truth? Hassan's voice dropped. When Abdi Warsame was murdered, the gallery gasped. Even the committee members looked shocked. The FBI informant you mentioned, Patel asked. Yes. 2 weeks after the Congresswoman revealed his name in that phone call, he was shot outside his apartment. Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility. They knew exactly where he lived, when he'd be alone. They had information only someone inside our government could have provided. And you believe Representative Omar provided that information? I don't believe it. I know it. I was in the room when she made the call. Tears were running down Hassan's face now. Abdi was a good man. He had 3 kids. He was trying to help stop terrorism, and she got him killed. The weight of the accusation hung in the air. Murder. A sitting member of Congress complicit in murder. Kash Patel let the moment sink in before continuing. Mr. Hassan, why did you finally come forward? Because it was getting worse. The money transfers were increasing. The intelligence sharing was expanding. And then I found out about the training camps. Training camps? Hassan nodded. The Congresswoman was funding terrorist training camps in Somalia. Not just with money, with equipment, supplies, even personnel. Personnel. Young men from Minneapolis. She'd identify potential recruits, arrange their travel, ensure they made it to the camps. At least 40 that I know of. 40 American citizens sent to terrorist training camps. That I documented. There were probably more. Byron Donalds pulled up a new document. Is this one of those recruits? On the screen was a passport photo of a young man, barely out of his teens. Hassan's voice broke. That's Muhammad Ali, 19 years old, star student at Roosevelt High. The Congresswoman convinced him he'd be doing humanitarian work. He died in a drone strike 6 months later, fighting for Al-Shabaab. How many others died? At least 12 that I know of. Kids who thought they were going to help rebuild Somalia. Instead, they became terrorists and died as terrorists. Omar couldn't contain herself.
You're twisting everything.
These were humanitarian missions. Then explain this. Patel projected a new document. This is a satellite image of one of your humanitarian camps. See those structures? Those are weapons training facilities. Those are barracks. That's a bomb-making workshop. You can't prove. Actually, we can. Patel smiled grimly. Because one of your recruits survived and came home. He's been cooperating with the FBI for 6 months. Would you like to hear his testimony? Omar's lawyers pulled her back down, whispering urgently. Let's talk about the money trail. Byron Donalds said. Mr. Hassan, how was all this funded? Multiple sources. Hassan replied. Campaign funds diverted through consulting fees. Charitable donations laundered through fake nonprofits. But the biggest source was foreign money. Foreign money. The Congresswoman had connections to wealthy supporters in Qatar, Turkey, and Pakistan. They'd donate to her various organizations, she'd take a cut, and send the rest to Somalia. How much foreign money are we talking about? Over my 5 years there, at least $20 million. $20 million in foreign funds flowing through a congressional office to terrorist organizations. Conservatively, it could be much more. Patel pulled out another file. Let's look at some of these transactions. This one here, November 2022. 500,000 from the Qatar American Friendship Foundation. What happened to that money? Hassan consulted his notes. That was split 3 ways. 200,000 stayed with the Congresswoman's political organizations. 250,000 went to Somalia through the usual channels. The remaining 50,000, he paused. What? Went to a mosque in Minneapolis that was preaching violent jihad. You're saying Representative Omar funded radical preaching in her own district? Not just funded, protected. When the FBI tried to investigate that mosque, she intervened. Called it religious persecution, organized protests. The investigation was dropped. The implications were staggering. A member of Congress actively protecting and funding radical extremism on American soil. There's something else, Hassan said. The Congresswoman wasn't working alone. The room tensed. What do you mean? Patel asked. She had help. Other members of Congress, staff members, even some people in federal agencies. Names? Byron Donalds demanded. We need names. Hassan looked at Omar, then back at the committee. Representatives Rashida Tlaib and Andre Carson were both aware of the network. They attended meetings, helped move money, provided political cover. More gasps from the gallery. This was expanding into a full-blown conspiracy. What about federal agencies? There was someone in the State Department. Codename Eagle. They provided diplomatic pouches to move cash, warned about investigations, helped with visa fraud for the recruits. Do you know Eagle's real identity? No. The Congresswoman was very careful about that. But I know they were high-ranking. Had access to classified intelligence. Kash Patel made a note. This would require a separate investigation. Mr. Hassan, he continued, you've painted a picture of massive criminal conspiracy. Why should we believe you? Hassan reached into his jacket. Because I have proof of everything. He pulled out a hard drive. 5 years of emails, recordings, financial documents, videos. Everything you need to prosecute. How did you obtain all this? Some of it was given to me as part of my job. Some I copied when I realized what was happening. And some, he paused, some I obtained by staying close even when I wanted to run. I knew someday I'd need evidence. You wore a wire. For the last year, yes. You FBI approved and monitored.
You were spying on me in my office. That's illegal.
No, Patel responded calmly. That's law enforcement. When you're running a terror network from your congressional office, you lose the right to privacy. He turned back to Hassan. What's on the drive? Everything, including a video from last month. The Congresswoman meeting with a known al-Shabaab operative in her office. The room went silent. In her congressional office, Byron Donalds asked, a terrorist. He entered using a fake ID provided by the Congresswoman. They discussed the next phase of operations. More money, more recruits, and Hassan paused. An attack. Here, in America. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Omar's lawyers stopped whispering. What kind of attack? Patel asked quietly. I don't know the details, they spoke in code. But the date was clear, July 4, 2024, multiple cities. Coordinated, and Representative Omar was helping plan this. She provided target intelligence. Security vulnerabilities at major gatherings. Police deployment schedules. My God, someone whispered from the gallery. Patel stood up. Mr. Hassan, I need to ask you directly. Are you saying that Representative Ilhan Omar was actively planning a terrorist attack on American soil? I'm saying she was providing material support for others to plan it. Whether she knew the exact details or not, she was enabling mass murder. Byron Donalds turned to Omar. Representative, do you have anything to say? Omar stood slowly, her composure finally cracking. This is all lies. Fabrication. I'm being targeted because I'm Muslim, because I'm black, because I criticize Israel. Stop, Patel interrupted. This isn't about your religion or your race. This is about bank records, recordings, documents. This is about evidence. Evidence can be faked. Then explain this. Patel clicked a remote. A video began playing on the screen. Security footage, grainy but clear enough. Omar's office. She was sitting across from a man whose face was partially obscured. The audio was muffled but audible. Omar, the July operation needs maximum impact. Man, we have fighters ready. We need locations. Omar, I have the Intelligence Committee schedules. Major gatherings in D.C., New York, Minneapolis. Soft targets. Man payment. Omar, 3 million. Use the usual channels. The video ended. The room was tomb silent. That was recorded 3 weeks ago, Patel said. The man in that video is Yusuf al-Amriki, number 3 in al-Shabaab's hierarchy. He entered this building using credentials provided by Representative Omar. How? Byron Donalds asked. How does a known terrorist get into the Capitol? Ask her, Patel pointed at Omar. Ask her how many others she's brought in. Ask her how many terrorists have walked these halls because of her. Omar's lead attorney stood. We need a recess. My client needs. Your client needs to be arrested. Patel interrupted. He turned to the Capitol police officers at the door. Detain Representative Omar. She's a flight risk and a national security threat. You can't do this, Omar shouted as officers approached. I have immunity. I'm a member of Congress. Your immunity doesn't cover treason, Byron Donalds said coldly. It doesn't cover terrorism. It doesn't cover murder. As the officers reached her, Omar made one last desperate play. I'll cooperate. I'll tell you everything. The network is bigger than you know. Patel paused. How much bigger? 6 other members of Congress, dozens of staffers, people in the FBI, CIA, State Department. This is bigger than Al-Shabaab. This is about changing America from within. Names. Byron demanded. Give us names. Omar looked at her lawyers, who nodded grimly. She was trapped and they all knew it. Tlaib, like Ahmed said. Carson. But also Ocasio-Cortez, Presley Bush. They all knew. They all helped. The squad. Someone gasped from the gallery. We called ourselves that as a joke, Omar said bitterly. The real squad was much bigger. And our mission wasn't progressive politics. It was infiltration. It was transformation. It was treason. Patel finished. It was treason. The Capitol Police moved in, handcuffs ready. As they reached for her wrists, Omar made one final statement. You think you've won. You think stopping me stops anything. We're everywhere. In your government, your schools, your media. The revolution isn't coming. It's already here. They cuffed her and began leading her out. As she passed Hassan, she spat at him. No, Hassan replied quietly. Patriot. The hearing room erupted as Omar was led away. Reporters scrambled to file stories. Other members of Congress sat in stunned silence, some probably wondering if they were next. Kash Patel gavelled for order. This hearing is suspended pending emergency security briefings. All evidence will be transferred to the Department of Justice and the FBI. Mr. Hassan, you'll be placed in protective custody immediately. As people began filing out, Byron Donalds approached Hassan. You did the right thing. It couldn't have been easy. Hassan wiped his eyes. I loved my community. I wanted to help them. But she turned that love into something evil. She used our struggles, our faith, our hopes for a better Somalia. She corrupted all of it. Your testimony will save lives, Patel assured him. That July 4th plot will stop it because of you. I hope so, Hassan said. I pray so. Within hours, the FBI raids began. Rashida Tlaib was arrested at her home in Detroit. Andrew Carson in Indianapolis. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York. Ayanna Pressley in Boston. Cori Bush in St. Louis, the State Department's eagle, turned out to be Deputy Secretary Amanda Morrison, a career diplomat who'd been funneling intelligence to terrorist organizations for over a decade. The mosque in Minneapolis that Omar had protected was raided. FBI agents found weapons, bomb-making materials, and plans for attacks on July 4th celebrations in 12 cities. The foreign money trail led to arrests in Qatar, Turkey, and Pakistan. Billionaire supporters of global jihad who'd been using Omar and her network to fund terrorism while hiding behind legitimate politics. Over the next 6 months, the full scope of the conspiracy was revealed. What started as one congressional representative helping her homeland had morphed into a sophisticated terror network, operating at the highest levels of American government. The trial was the most watched in American history. Ilhan Omar, once celebrated as a breakthrough politician, now sat in defendant's chair facing charges of treason, material support for terrorism, conspiracy to commit murder, and 67 other federal counts. The evidence was overwhelming. Hassan's recordings, the financial documents, the testimony of captured terrorists who detailed how Omar had helped them, the families of dead recruits who told how she'd convinced their children to join jihad. But perhaps the most damaging was the testimony of Abdi Warsam's widow. My husband was a good man, she said through tears. He came to America for freedom, for safety. He worked with the FBI because he wanted to stop the violence, stop the killing. And she murdered him. That woman murdered him as surely as if she'd pulled the trigger herself. Omar showed no remorse. Even as witness after witness detailed her crimes, she sat stone-faced, occasionally whispering to her lawyers but never showing any emotion. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge didn't mince words. Representative Omar, you took an oath to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Instead, you became one of those enemies. You used your position of trust to fund terror, to kill Americans, to betray everything this nation stands for. You speak of justice for your people, but you brought them only death and shame. You speak of faith, but you perverted Islam into a weapon of hate. You speak of progress, but you tried to drag us back to medieval barbarism. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court will not. As Omar was led away, she turned to the gallery one last time. This isn't over, she shouted. The revolution continues. You can't stop what's coming. But she was wrong. Her arrest and conviction had exposed the network. The July 4th plot was foiled. Hundreds of conspirators were arrested. The infiltration she'd boasted about was rooted out. Ahmed Hassan was given a new identity and relocated. He'd lost everything. His community, his identity, his life as he knew it. But he'd saved countless lives. He'd chosen America over terrorism, truth over tribe. In a secure location somewhere in America, Hassan reflected on what had transpired. "I came to this country as a refugee," he told his FBI handler. "America gave me everything. When I saw someone trying to destroy it from within, I had to act. I had to choose, my boss or my country. I chose America." The Ilhan Omar case became a turning point in American history. It exposed the vulnerability of our political system to infiltration. It showed how foreign money and radical ideology could corrupt even elected officials. But it also showed that America's systems ultimately worked. That brave citizens like Ahmed Hassan would stand up for truth. That law enforcement would pursue justice regardless of political affiliation. That in the end, the Constitution would prevail. Omar's fellow conspirators were all convicted. The squad that had once dominated progressive politics was now dominating federal prisons. Their movement was discredited, their ideology exposed as a cover for terrorism. And somewhere in a maximum security cell, Ilhan Omar sat alone, her revolution ended, her crimes exposed, her legacy destroyed. The woman who'd come to America as a refugee and risen to Congress had thrown it all away for hatred and terror. She'd claimed to fight for justice. In the end, justice found her.